Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video is going to be a continuation of private banking, the concealment of the sources and uses of money, the concealment of the sources and uses of our land using various land trust transactions, which are done secretively because of course we live under maritime martial law, military law, and so public scrutiny is really not required. I know people like to think that there's county supervisors and city councils and state assemblies, and that we have this House of Representatives in the swamp in Washington, D.C., and we have a home for the nobility class called the U.S. Senate, and then we have an executive branch of government which is run by senile dementia or crazy cacophony of chaos Vice President Kamala Harris. It's all theater, okay? None of those people have any authority, and they certainly are not running the show. We also do not have a Supreme Court, nor do we have superior courts. We have buildings that they refer to as courthouses, and they have private, locked, secured rooms, which are called departments, which are called court rooms, and judges preside over maritime law inside those secured courtrooms, most of which do not have windows. Some do. I understand some courtrooms do have windows, but most of the courtrooms I've been in have no windows. They don't like anyone poking their nose up against the window. Typically, courtrooms are on the second floor, as for security. They don't have courtrooms on the ground floor for a reason. All right, well, anyway, let me just carry on by giving you my mantras that I'm going to follow for 2023, which is it's better to be slapped in the face by the truth than to be kissed with a lie. All right? And my second mantra is the long arm of coincidence will answer the question, does correlation equal causation? Well, let's find out, because today's discussion of money laundering, private banking, real estate shenanigans is going to involve the concept of real estate trusts, which is a play on charitable remainder trust, which is a form of evading the estate tax, transfer tax, gift tax, while still retaining control and full authority over any rent income or profits that are yield from leasing out your land to ranchers or to the United States military or a contractor like Raytheon Missile Guidance System, for example, or to Northrop Grumman, for another example, or to United States Navy, United States Marines, Camp Pendleton, West Coast Training Center, or out in 29 Palms in the desert, paying rent to whoever owns the land, which is typically a scion family. And I want to reiterate that when I refer to bankers, I believe there's 4 levels of what I would call bankers. Only really one of the levels has any real actual knowledge of banking, accounting, deposits, that type of thing, handling with customers, retail. But the top 3 levels of banking do not really get their fingernails dirty, so to speak. They don't go into the office on a regular basis. At the tippy top is what I call the circle of trust, which is kind of perverted. And that's a scion category where the people come from families who have, for hundreds of years, owned land and buildings and tangible property, and the corporations that rent space on their land. And they do have family members that are from this scion class that are in banking, for sure. And it's those family members that would supervise the next level down, which would be your private bankers of hedge funds, charitable endowments, the Jewish bankers on Sand Hill Road, Kleiner Perkins, KKR, Jerome Kohlberg's company, Henry Kravitz, George Roberts, private secret banking. And Sequoia Capital, which brought us FTX, and Alameda Research, Sam Bankman-Fried, who is residing 3.5 miles away from Doug Leone's office at 2800 Sand Hill Road, across the street from the Stanford University Linear Accelerator Project, which is financed by the Department of Energy, the same people that brought you the Lawrence Livermore Weapons Lab and the Los Alamos Weapons Lab, which brought us the hydrogen bomb. They're also operating at Sand Hill Road. Walking distance from where Aaron Valente last went missing, meeting with a private banker from KKR. Right? KKR. Kohlberg, Kravitz, and Roberts. 2500 Sand Hill Road. Right across the street from the Department of Energy, Stanford University. It's hard to tell the difference. Where does Stanford University begin and where does the Department of Energy end? And the answer is it doesn't. They're Siamese twins. They're inextricably linked, along with their bankers who are across the street. And they have at least 3 secret bankers who are across the street. If you don't believe me, ask Sam Bankman-Fried, who's no longer freed. He's fried. First, I'm going to cover basically 5 principal, what I believe are land trusts. They morph into a 6th category, which you'll be disturbed to find out about, which it looks like is the trend to you'll own nothing but be happy. That's the trend line that we're on for real estate, farmland, cattle ranching, food production, right? Housing, where you can live, where you can't live. You have to be in a smart grid with 5G towers. They don't want you off the grid because then they can't monitor you, right? So for my East Coast audience, I want to start with you because, of course, we can't do anything out here in Alta California without permission from our Manhattan, New York bankers. So we're going to start with what became known as the Hitchcock estate, which is 2,000 acres of property in the Hudson Valley, north of New York City, north of Yonkers. We have the beautiful, beautiful Hudson Valley. And around 1889, a gentleman who would be attributed to have founded Union Carbide, which is a settling gas company. Actually, it's the formation, consolidation of other gas companies into what became known as Union Carbide. I believe in 1917, Union Carbide was created. But gasoline acetylene gas companies existed before Union Carbide did. So it was the consolidation of other businesses. In any case, it was Charles F. Dieterich who was nosing around the Hudson Valley purchasing small parcels of land, which later became known as the Hitchcock estate. Not at that time. That name came later. And we're going to look into the Hitchcock estate. Then we're going to look at the Greenfield Ranch in Mendocino County, outside 8 miles northwest of Ukiah in Northern California. It's about 2 hours north of San Francisco. It's 5,600 acres, so it's more than double the size of the Hitchcock estate. It's almost triple. We're going to look at the Bohemian Grove in Sonoma County, which is about an hour 20 minutes north of San Francisco, and that is 2,700 acres. So it's larger than the Hitchcock estate. Then we're going to look, of course, at George Lucas, Star Wars, and what became known as the Skywalker properties and Skywalker Ranch, Nicasio. The Skywalker properties is 6,100 acres. However, it's broken into several pieces, and the Skywalker Ranch is supposedly 4,700 acres. Stay with me. It's a grand total of 6,100 acres, so it's over 3 times larger than the Millbrook estate, aka the Hitchcock estate, aka the Hudson Valley real estate project. Then the 5th trust I'm going to cover for you younger viewers is going to be having to do with Metallica, James Hetfield, 1,150 acres of property that he accumulated by being a rock star for Warner Brothers, the company that owns Neil Young, owns Metallica. And they own James Hetfield. So if they tell you to jump, you ask how high, right? Warner Brothers, they brought us The Summer of Love in San Francisco in 1967. Anyway, James Hetfield has, at the point of a gun, I believe, donated 1,000 acres of his 1,150. In 2005, he donated 440 acres to the Marin Agricultural Land Trust, aka CIA code MALT, acronym MALT. And I don't mean malt liquor, although I think you have to drink malt liquor to donate your land to malt. Marin Agricultural Land Trust. That's the fifth trust we're going to examine. All right, so we're going to come back to that. James Hetfield, who knew that he owned 1,150 acres of land next door to George Lucas, which is in the same neighborhood where Wolfgang Jonka, Bill Graham owned property atop a panoramic view in Corte Madera, above Tiburon, above Belvedere, above Mill Valley, in close proximity to where the Metallica property would be located, not far. This is CIA Northern California. Now, there's other land trusts that I want to talk about, like the William Randolph Land Trust, where the Hearst Castle is, and the Army Fort Hunter Liggett is, Mission San Antonio, the Esalen Institute, the Himalayan Society, renamed the Miller Library, the Henry Miller Library in Big Sur. Anyway, that property is mostly under the control of the William Randolph Land Trust. I also want to talk about the Santa Margarita Land Trust, which goes from Orange County, El Toro Marine Air Base on El Toro Road, down to Laguna Beach and Newport Beach and Balboa Island, all the way past San Clemente, where Richard Nixon had his White House of the West, and down to Camp Pendleton, Marine Base in Oceanside, out to where Lino LaBianca was purchasing a horse ranch about 12 miles inland. And then that's northern San Diego County. I want to talk about the Santa Margarita Land Trust, but not today. And I'm not going to talk about the William Randolph Hearst Trust today. I am going to talk about Union Carbide, and I am going to talk about the different facilities that Union Carbide has. And I'm also going to talk about how all these people seem to know each other, and the world is much simpler than we think it is. Okay? So let's go back to what was referred to after 1963 as the Hitchcock estate. All right, let me read you a little story about how that began. Okay, the magical drug mansion in upstate New York, where the psychedelic 1960s took off. Yeah, but it took off at Harvard University, did it not? With Richard Albert, who was a Stanford University professor, who in the 1950s, the late 1950s, went to Harvard to become a lecturer professor. Anyway, this of course is discussed because we have Allen Greensburg, Charles Minkus, Timothy Leary, and Richard Albert, of course, are all involved in the story of the psychedelic 60s, right? Because you need fake authors to celebrate a fake CIA cover story. This is a CIA operation. Anyway, William Mellon Hitchcock, the key word there is Mellon, of the Mellon Bank of Pennsylvania, the Mellon family. They married in with the Hitchcock family. And William Mellon Hitchcock, of course, was a tall, charming, blonde stockbroker who worked for Lehman Brothers. Remember Lehman Brothers before they were selected for extinction on Wall Street, along with Bear Stearns? But that didn't bother Jerome Kohlberg. He was already set up with KKR by the time Bear Stearns went the way of the dodo bird. Anyway, Billy, as William Mellon Hitchcock was called, was a tall, charming, blonde stockbroker in his 20s who worked for Lehman Brothers in New York City. Anyway, of course, he had a trust fund, and of course his wife had a bigger trust fund. Anyway, they thought it would be fun to go buy the Millbrook property in northern New York. The thing is that they're not in charge. This is a bank-controlled facility, and the Mellon family would control this property. But before I get to 1963, I want to go back a little further in time and discuss who put together all those parcels, which ultimately became the magical 64-room Hitchcock estate. No relation to Alfred Hitchcock. I want to make that crystal clear. Alfred Hitchcock, that's a whole nother kettle of fish story that we'll get into later. Not today. The Hitchcock estate in Millbrook, New York is a historic mansion. It's surrounded by grounds associated with Timothy Leary and the psychedelic movement. When we say Timothy Leary, you're talking CIA. He's career CIA. And he went to the Holy Cross College. He went to West Point Military Army Academy. He's military. He's CIA operative. He had 5 wives and 5 divorces. He had a 42-year-old daughter commit suicide in the same prison where they beat a confession out of Susan Atkins at the Sybil Institute. They call it an institute. The Sybil Brand Institute in El Monte, Los Angeles. And Timothy Leary's daughter was murdered there. They say she hung herself with her shoelaces, but I'm here to tell you, you're not permitted to have shoelaces in the county jail. But I guess they let you have shoelaces in the Sybil Brand Institute if you're supposed to go bye-bye. Anyway, sometimes the Hitchcock Institute is referred to just as Millbrook, and although its original name was Daheim, which is German for the home place, Daheim. It's 2,300 acres to 2,500 acres, depending on who you believe. And it was assembled through the purchasing of small farms, primarily 5 intermediate-sized farms, by Charles F. Dieterich, okay, who lived 1836 to 1927. He was the founder of Union Carbide, the acetylene gas company. All right? And it was referred to as the Daheim, his home. Charles Dieterich referred to it as Daheim. It was then transferred. They built a home on it, the 64-room Victorian mansion, which is architecturally known as the Queen Anne style. It's also known as the Bavarian Baroque style. The estate features a large gatehouses, horse stables, and other outbuildings. They opened the property up for hunting. The many wealthy aristocrat families went there for hunting trips. The ownership of the estate passed when Charles Dieterich passed away in 1927. Before he passed away, you should know that another Charles Dieterich was born in 1913. Charles Dieterich, the founder of the Church of Synanon and a participant in Alcoholics Anonymous, he was born in Ohio. Charles Dieterich was 13 years old when Charles F. Dieterich, the founder of Union Carbide, died. There's no relation that I can tell between the two Charles Dieterichs, but what I can tell you is both Charles Dieterichs are associated with high crimes and misdemeanors because of the things that went on and properties that they were entrusted to or provisionally assigned. Because that's really what I've learned in my research, is that almost none of these billionaires really own anything. The bank owns it, and then they consign the property to certain tenants. And I believe that Charles F. Dieterich, the so-called founder of Union Carbide, which he couldn't have done that with his own money. So the bank probably financed the Union Carbide project, consolidation, and then they assigned him the Millbrook estate, which he called Daheim, a Baroque Bavarian property. Anyway, the ownership was then transferred to Walter C. Teagle from Charles F. Dieterich. Now, Walter C. Teagle, in case you didn't know, he's the president of Standard Oil, which is Exxon. So, again, I'm sure he's highly paid, as part of the Rockefeller family. However, he is an employee, so he wouldn't be able to afford 2,500 acres. So the bank then just transferred the property to Walter Teagle, and then he transferred it to the Billy Hitchcock family, which is really the Mellon Bank family, in 1963. So you see the magic trick here, people, is we have the founder, the so-called founder of Union Carbide, but it already existed under other names previously. And that all occurred in 1917. And as soon as he, at the time that they're founding Union Carbide, he is building the estate in the Millbrook, which is sometimes referred to as Daheim. It later, in 1963, is consigned to Timothy Leary and Robert Albert, who were unceremoniously fired from Harvard University for restructuring the mind of one of their students off campus. And Ted Kaczynski was one of those students that they were restructuring. But everything went fine with Ted Kaczynski, no problem. Later, he became a Unabomber. After he got his PhD from University of California, Berkeley, he became a Unabomber, right? Out there in the San Francisco Bay Area. All right, so then, stay with me. You're not going to believe it. So while Richard Albert and Timothy Leary are doing their electroshock treatment and LSD and psilocybin hallucinogenic drugs programs at the Millbrook Institute, known as the Hitchcock Estate, which is 1963-64, Timothy Leary and a group founded International Federation for Internal Freedom, the IFIF. I guess that's where you sit in your room, take drugs, tune in, turn on, and drop out, right? The IFIF, the International Federation for Internal Freedom. That's called pacification and control. That's what the CIA and William Colby would refer to as sheltering in place. They would refer to that as COVID. They would refer to that as staying in your room, tune in, turn on, and drop out. That's called the International Federation for Internal Freedom. So you have internal freedom, you have external slavery, but you have internal freedom. Well, that's what prisoners have at the state and federal prison. They have internal freedom because they have no ability to leave the facility, right? Anyway, they created quite a circus atmosphere there with the psychedelics. They also formed the Castalia Foundation and hosted weekend retreats on this property, this 2,500 acre property, where people paid to undergo psychedelic experiences with or without drugs through meditation, which would be like the Maharishi was doing in London, England, right? TM, Transcendental Meditation. They had transcendental meditation going on at the Millbrook Institute. Yoga, group therapy sessions. Timothy Leary, Richard Albert, Ralph Metzner. Yeah, Ralph Metzner. What about him? He's a German-born American psychologist, writer, and researcher. And he did research at Harvard University in the early 60s. And he partnered up with Timothy Leary and Richard Albert. And what else can I tell you about him? So he's there too, Ralph Metzner. Anyway, he ends up writing a book called The Psychedelic Experience at the Mansion. The people who lived in that 64-room house were Arthur Kleps, Maynard Ferguson, who was a jazz musician, R.D. Lang, Alan Watts, Alan Grinsberg, of course, a Jewish poet, Nina Gaboy, who is a Holocaust survivor, another Jewish lady, and she is an influential figure in the 1960s psychedelic unit. After fleeing the Nazis in Europe, she dedicates herself to psychedelicness on the Millbrook Institute. That all makes sense, doesn't it? Anyway, I guess G. Gordon Liddy showed up from the FBI one day to do a fake arrest of Timothy Leary because that was sort of the end of Timothy Leary's activities at the Millbrook Institute, because we know he wasn't convicted of any crime, because he ends up in San Francisco working with Abigail Folger's mother, Enos Mejia. In 1965, Timothy Leary repositions himself to San Francisco to the United States Army base, Presidio. All right, that's the end of my discussion on the Millbrook Institute on the Hudson River in the Hudson Valley. You can call it the Hitchcock Institute, the Hitchcock Estate, the Millbrook Estate, the Daheim Estate, the Mellon Bank property. You could call it the Charles F. Dieterich Union Carbide property, who also happens to have land in British Guiana where Jonestown was, well, the People's Temple Agricultural Project. The media called it Jonestown. That's not what Union Carbide called it. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. They also have a facility in Torrance, Los Angeles County, which is adjacent to the Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach, and also where Downey is. And Downey is the home to Northrop Grumman, and is also the home to Hughes Space and Communications satellites. And you should know that the other Charles Dieterich of the Church of Synanon, he worked for the Hughes Tool Company before he became a leader of the Church of Synanon, with offices in Santa Monica, Oakland, California, and Marin County and Tomales Bay in the town of Marshall, known as the Marconi Institute, which is owned by RCA, Radio Corporation of America, 68 acres of land. That's important. We're going to come back to that when we talk about the Marin Agricultural Land Trust. All right, so that's it. We're going to say goodbye to the East Coast. We're going to zip on out now to the Greenfield Ranch in Mendocino County. 5,600 acres of land. This was home to Jim Jones, the People's Temple. This was home to Charlie Manson, whose real name is Miles Maddox. Watching my channel, you know there was no Charlie Manson, but there was a Jim Jones from Indianapolis, Indiana, and he took his church to San Francisco, linked up with Abigail Folger's mother, then was repositioned up to Ukiah, where Jim Jones became the foreman of the grand jury of the county of Mendocino. So he's kind of a big shot. When you're he wasn't on the grand jury, he was the foreman of the grand jury. So he's on it, but he's the boss. That means he's more important than the judges and the lawyers in Mendocino County. That's called fast tracking, and he's in his 30s. And there he is, okay? He's up there in his 30s. He's the same age as Dianne Feinstein, okay? And she's like 37, 38 years old. And he's the foreman of the grand jury in Mendocino County, and has homes in the Greenfield Ranch. He has a home in Philo, and I'm sure has an apartment in Ukiah, because these are a grand total of a 70-mile radius area. The Greenfield Ranch gate is about 8 to 10 miles outside the town of Ukiah, which is the county seat for Mendocino. This is also home to eventually Charles Ng and Leonard Lake, who kill or murder 25 missing people. They had dwellings on the Greenfield Ranch. This is in close proximity where Angela Lansbury filmed her Murder, She Wrote, again a Jewish-produced show by William Link and Richard Levinson, who produced Columbo, right? Executive producer Philip Salzman, all Jewish. And Angela Lansbury has a television show out of Mendocino, not too far away from where Greenfield Ranch is located. Also, as of late, and let's not forget that when People's Temple was relocated to Union Carbide property in British Guiana, it then had the murder of 906 people. And they were murdered with M16 rifles, bayonets, M7 bayonets, and then the children, which is about 150 of the 900 victims, 150 to 200 people drank the Flavor Aid. That was the children. The parents didn't drink the Kool-Aid. There was no Kool-Aid. There was Flavor Aid. It's a different product. Anyway, the cyanide-laced Flavor Aid was fed to the children. But we have 906 people dead. We have 170 paramilitary guards who didn't wear uniforms, and they went missing, along with Mark Levin Lane, who ended up in Paris, France, with a suitcase full of cash. So for some reason, certain people escaped unharmed from Jonestown, which was referred to as the People's Temple Agricultural Project. Anyway, after Charles Ng and Leonard Lane were done with their operation of murdering 25 people, there actually is a lake on the property that's called Leonard Lake. It was called Leonard Lake before Leonard Lake ever appeared on the property. That's how Hollywood likes to play with us. So I have Greenfield Ranch that borders Leonard Lake. Then I have a serial killer from the United States Marines with 2 tours of duty in Da Nang, Vietnam, and he goes on to murder 25 people, and his name is Leonard Lake. And he's living next to Leonard Lake, his own namesake. Anyway, he commits suicide with cyanide poisoning in a South San Francisco substation for the police, which I gotta believe, how can you commit suicide in an interrogation room? They do search you. I mean, my understanding is you're searched before you go into the sheriff's department. But I guess if you're a serial killer who works for CIA, they don't search you. So you can just whip out your cyanide pills. Anyway, now it's home to some woman who's named Lasara Firefox Allen. And we don't know too much about her, but she was born and raised on the Greenfield Ranch, which is a place where we create CIA cult religions, right? Like People's Temple. Anyway, she's an American writer and a video game designer. She's a sex educator. She's into neuro-linguistic programming. I guess that's for people who want to believe in Noam Chomsky. They've been neuro-linguistic programmed, restructured. Because if you believe in Noam Chomsky, you're definitely in the MK Ultra universe. Also, Lazaro Firefox is a family traditionalist of witchcraft, and she's a 23rd generation high priestess, whatever that means. So in other words, the Greenfield Ranch promotes People's Temple, Jim Jones. They sent Charlie Manson up there for a really short period of time, like less than 45 days. In 1967, during the Summer of Love, Charlie Manson was up there between 3 weeks and 6 weeks. I think they were going to make Charlie a preacher, but it didn't work out, and I'm not going to give you the reason why, which I happen to have a understanding of what that was. Anyway, they promote People's Temple. They promote Charles Ng and Leonard Lake serial killing of people with video equipment, and they videotape virtually all the murders, but the authorities won't release the tapes. And then they produce a high priestess by the name of Lazaro Firefox Allen, who's a writer, game designer, neuro-linguistics programmer. All right, that's all I want to talk about the Greenfield Ranch, other than to say it's 5,600 acres. That makes it about worth $6 billion. It has a Mendocino taxable base of $26,000. So you tell me how $6 billion, and you charge income taxes, you charge property taxes, based on an assessed value of $26,000. So that's a land trust magic is what that is. Now we're going to move to the Bohemian Grove, which has been around since the late 1800s. It's also was put together by a series of land purchases. It's 2,700 acres, 2,700 acres in Sonoma County on the Russian River. Outside, the main gate is outside Monte Rio on the Russian River, on the Bohemian Highway. And there are other gates that you should know. There are other gates to get into the Bohemian Grove. The public generally doesn't know about those. There are surveillance cameras at all perimeter access places. There's probably surveillance cameras everywhere. It's a very undulating, steep property, rainforest of redwood trees. So it's not an easy property to get around on. It's very mountainous, okay? And the main cities that border the Bohemian Grove are Monterey, which is the main town, Occidental, which is on the south west quadrant of the Bohemian Grove, Occidental, and then Guerneville, which is on the northeast corner of the property, across the river from Guerneville on the Russian River. And that is where the Moloch owl is. And it is referred to as the Moloch owl. Some people want to call it the Lilith owl. But if you've ever been there, they call it Moloch. So, hate to disappoint you, but it's a fireplace. It's 40 feet tall. It's the Moloch owl. All right. I don't want to get into, there's all kinds of rumors about the Bohemian Grove, human sacrifice or hunting children. As a hunting place, it would be a terrible place to hunt animals or people unless you put them into a cage pen because all you got to do, it's easy to get on and off that property. The only way you could catch people is if you had them GPS tracked or Raytheon missile guidance tracked, because they could get away otherwise, because you'd have to cheat to get your prey. Your prey can escape because the property is too difficult to get around. There's ferns everywhere. It's easy to hide. But if you had infrared and tracking devices, well, of course, you can catch someone in a landfill, okay? So the story of hunting in the Grove is kind of a preposterous story. That's like saying I deer hunt from a helicopter. So could you deer hunt from a helicopter? Sure, you could do that. Do they do it in the Grove? Definitely not in a helicopter, because a helicopter would crash and burn. But if you had all the other, laser guided tracking devices, sure, you could do a hunting. But I don't consider that hunting. I consider that, murder is what I call that. So, all right, that's it for the Bohemian Grove. Then my next story is going to be about George Lucas, who came from Modesto Junior College to USC Film School, got a film internship with Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers, those are the people that brought us Metallica. They also brought us Neil Young. They brought us The Summer of Love, 1967. And they brought us Laurel Canyon. Anyway, they brought us George Lucas because his first major film that he directed was THX 1138, $550,000 funded from Warner Brothers, along with Francis Ford Coppola as producer, executive producer, and George Lucas, age 25, as the director. And he took time to film the murder of Meredith Hunter, age 18, out there at the Altamont Pass Free concert at the Altamont Raceway. There's George Lucas, age 25, in between filming THX 1138 with Robert Duvall and Donald Pleasance. Big time. Anyway, he magically starts purchasing land in 1978 in Marin County, and it starts out in small segments, and it balloons and balloons and balloons to eventually becomes 6,100 acres of land. It's it's discussed as the Skywalker Ranch, the Skywalker properties accumulate to 6,100 acres. It's broken into the Skywalker Ranch, which was the portion of the Bulltail Ranch, which was the first purchase in 1978. The Big Rock Ranch, which is was home to the Lucas Digital Film Company, which you won't be surprised, he relocated 250 employees from his Lucas Digital Film Company from the Skywalker Ranch, Big Rock, to the United States Presidio, where the Spanish built the military fort in 1776, and he has now got the Lucas Digital Film Company in the Presidio, where Sharon Tate's father lived, where Nancy and Paul Pelosi live to this day, adjacent to that property on Pacific Avenue. Back when Paul Tate and the Zodiac Killer were there, the Pelosi's lived at Presidio Heights, which again is adjacent to the Presidio Army Base, which is where George Lucas's film company is located. Anyway, George Lucas has donated, allegedly, some of his property, which they valued at $2.9 million, but is really worth $3 billion. They transferred 1,214 acres from the Lucas Skywalker properties to MALT, M-A-L-T, which is CIA acronym for Marin Agricultural Land Trust. All right? You should know that on the Skywalker Ranch Nicasio property, which borders Stafford Lake and Fred Corda's ranch, Stafford Lake is the watershed to the town of Novato, which was home to the Renaissance Fair. Leonard Lake, the serial killer, worked for the Renaissance Fair off Atherton Drive in Nevada for several years before he became a serial killer working out of the Greenfield Ranch and Wilseyville Cabins in Calaveras County in the Sierras. You should know that George Lucas, they built a lake, a man-made lake on Skywalker Ranch. They called the lake Ewok Lake to go with the film Star Wars. The problem that I have with that is that there used to be an Indian tribe, Native American tribe called the Miwoks. So there really was a Native American tribe called the Miwoks, M-I-W-O-K. And here we have George Lucas changing history and saying, oh no, it's the Ewok, it's Ewok Lake. No, it's Miwok. This is how we do it. This is how the San Francisco Civic Auditorium is now called the Bill Graham Auditorium. Bill Graham is CIA, his CIA name. He's from the Bronx, New York. Why are we calling an auditorium in San Francisco after a CIA agent from the Bronx? But that's what we're doing. His name is Wolfgang Janka. He's a Jewish fellow from Berlin, Germany. How the heck do we get to Bill Graham, which came out of a phone book in New York? But that's what we're doing with the Skywalker properties. We're renaming things so we have a fake history for the kids, the grandchildren. Anyway, my last trust is going to be the James Hetfield Metallica Family Trust. I don't even know who this guy is, but, you know, whatever. He grew up where Northrop Grumman is in Downey, Southern California, near Torrance, near the Union Carbide plant, near the Hughes Space and Communications Facility. That's where James Hetfield came from. Anyway, in 1999, he bought the Luis Ranch, which is in Marin County, 1,150 acres, and then over the last 20 years, he's been giving it away. 440 acres in 2005, he donated to the Malt Marin Agricultural Land Trust. Okay, then he did 320-acre gift in 2009, and then he did another 240-acre gift in 2018, which means he retains 150 acres. He's given away 1,000 acres, so he's given about 85% of his property to the Marin Agricultural Land Trust, which I'm calling a CIA bank facility. It was managed by Robert Berner. Robert Berner was the executive director. He supposedly responded to an ad placed by, you're not going to believe this, that he responded to a land to the Straus family because the Marin Agricultural Land Trust didn't just come from under a rock. It actually emanated from Bill Straus. Bill Straus was born at the starting of World War I in Hamburg, Germany in 1914. In 1934, inspired by his father's profession, he left Germany with some young Jews involved with Zionist agricultural youth movement to get away from the Nazis, I guess. Anyway, they went to the Czech Republic, and then from the Czech Republic, where he learned farming, he fled the Nazis. First, they went to Palestine with his mother in 1936. Then, in 1937, he visited San Luis Obispo and fell in love with California in 1937. After studying agriculture at University of California, Berkeley, and Davis, which we know are clandestine service indoctrination center, Bill purchased a small dairy in Tomales Bay. Yeah, in the town of Marshall in 1941. That's where Charles Dieterich's Church of Synanon is. That's where RCA is. In 1941, it was Radio Corporation America had a radio signaling facility right where Bill Straus bought his dairy farm. Right where RCA, Clandestine Service, Navy Intelligence is. That's where Bill, of all the places on the California coast, that Bill Straus wants to get a dairy farm in Marin County, which has lots of milk cows. He picks Tomales Bay at the Marconi Center. Marconi is the type of radio that was in vogue in 1941, which was copyright controlled, patent controlled by RCA. And that is where Bill Straus, a Jewish gentleman fleeing the Nazis, puts together a dairy farm in the town of Marshall. I know it well, done the Marshall Road Race many times. His wife, Ellen Straus, was born Ellen Prins in Amsterdam, Holland. In 1940, she fled the Nazis, and she ended up in New York. Okay? And somehow she met Bill Straus, and they got married. So Ellen Prins became Ellen Straus. Anyway, she then places an ad in the Chronicle, I guess, and that is how they found their first executive director in 1980, which coincides to when George Lucas developed the Skywalker, was beginning to develop the Skywalker Ranch. The first parcel purchase was in 1978, but this Marin Agricultural Land Trust was created simultaneously to the Luke Skywalker Ranch facility. But you should know that the other George Dieterich from the Church of Synanon, he moved on to the Tomales Bay property in 1965. So he must be neighbors with Bill and Ellen Straus. Charles Dieterich, I don't know how much time he spent up there, because I was understanding he was working out of UCLA and in Santa Monica most of the time. He also had an Oakland facility on Lake Merritt, which is a hike from here, but it's in Northern California and San Francisco Bay. So Church of Synanon had 3 locations: Santa Monica, okay, and then he had Oakland, California, which was an Oakland athletics gymnasium with residence housing upstairs, and then he was in the Marconi Center at Tomales Bay, next door to Ellen and Bill Straus in Tomales Bay, which is a Navy signaling facility. All right? And then they hire, along with a botanist, but another Jewish lady by the name of, I'll give you her name in a second here. So you got Bill and Ellen with their dairy farm and their family working the farm on a CIA-controlled property, OSS controlled at that time. And then in late 1970s, 1980, they form the Marin Agricultural Land Trust with the help of another person. Where is it? This is when they hired Bob Berner, who became the executive director. And I'll give you the name here. Phyllis Faber of Mill Valley. Phyllis Faber and Ellen Straus were on the board of directors of the Marin Agricultural Land Trust. They hire Bob Berner to be their executive director. He has a red BMW motorcycle. He works with George Lucas. He works with Fred Cordo and the Stafford Lake Reservoir. And they start putting properties into this 501c3 tax-exempt trust. All right, so, and that includes James Hetfield, who puts 1,000 acres of his property into the trust. And the reason he does, because it doesn't really belong to him. You can't be a rock star and work for Warner Brothers and think you own anything. You think Paul McCartney owns anything? No. He's doing a job. I mean, why isn't he retired and off camera, right? Why isn't Neil Young just go away? And the reason is because they're crisis actors. They're going to do a job like Henry Kissinger until the clandestine services is done with them, because they cannot retire. It's impossible. That's my point of money laundering. Nobody owns anything, and they may or may not be happy. I have a feeling that people are not happy. They don't really own anything, even though they're billionaires, but they don't really own anything because they have to come into the office a lot. All right, that's my story for today, and I hope you enjoyed it. It's quite a disturbing event of money laundering concealment. Concealment of names, concealment of property records, concealment of who really owns the property, and concealment of world mission. But I think you can see that they're consolidating the land, farming, ranching, dairy farming, watersheds, hunting rights are going away. Access to open space is going away. Mojave Desert, there's no motorcycle racing out there anymore. They don't want nosy people hiking out there. The Navy and the Army and the Air Force control 12,000 square miles of property, and you can't use it. The Bureau of Land Management is like the Nazis. You can't go on that property. They got surveillance equipment on the perimeters. Union Carbide has facilities in King City and also near Hollister where they mined asbestos, for God's sakes. Raytheon Missile Guidance has an underground facility not that far away from Union Carbide's facility in Hollister, San Juan Bautista, San Benito County. Okay? So what I've learned from motorcycle racing and bicycle racing and finance and working with bankers is that the Navy and the clandestine military are all over California. They're right under your nose. You don't even know they're there. And they're disguised. They're disguised as state parks. They're disguised as ranches. They're underground. They're above ground. They call them things that they're not. And that's all part of concealment or omitting the truth. Omissions of facts are a concealment of truth. That's how our meta-universe works. And in the infamous words last spoken by Aaron Valente, who went missing after meeting with Dean Jacobson at 2500 Santo Road, who was managing director of Excel KKR, Kohlberg, Kravis, and Roberts, she said to her mother in New York, "It's all a game. It's a thought experiment. We're in the Matrix." Thank you, Aaron. I believe you. Have a great day.